That was a fascinating chat with His Excellency Teo Chi-Hian and Bobby Ghosh. Next, we will be hearing from His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. His Excellency will be joined by Ali Velshi, host of Velshi on MSNBC and a senior business correspondent at NBC. I am particularly excited to be introducing today's session, first as a board member of the Soufan Center, but also because Ali Velshi is my husband. I first met Ali when he interviewed me my first time on TV many years ago, and we went on to get married several years later. Given that this is his third or fourth time interviewing His Excellency, I'm confident that there will be a different outcome for the two of them, but it will be an outstanding conversation, I am sure. I will now turn it over to the two of them for this session, which will reflect on Qatar's role in mitigating regional crises and in responding to global challenges, including the unfolding situation in Afghanistan.
Thank you to Lori, and thank you, Your Excellency. Good to see you again. We met virtually last year, and we hoped and imagined that we'd get a chance to talk in person, and we have. We always enjoy our candid conversations and of course, being hosted here in Qatar. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Ali, for hosting me today. I'm really glad to see the Global Security Forum is nurturing every year. And last year, unfortunately, with the COVID situation, we couldn't get along together, but I'm really glad that this year we could make it physically.
Things change. Every time you and I talk, the world completely is a different place. And this is a very different place than it was last year. We still have COVID. We have your state, which enjoys very different relationships both with the United States and your neighbors than it had last year. That situation continues to evolve. And you have the story that goes above all of that now, and that is what has happened in Afghanistan. I don't think when you and I last spoke, we could have guessed this was going to be where we are. You have played such a central role in the negotiations leading to the U.S. departure, in the evacuation of people from Afghanistan, and in the current discussions that are going on right here in Doha. So I want to start with some high-level stuff. We have a crisis in Afghanistan. We have a government there, a Taliban government, which is not recognized, supported by, or cooperated with by much of the world. And they are in your country, sitting at the table with the Americans, trying to hammer something out. And I think I want to start out with, what does that something look like to you? What does success look like to you with respect to the discussions that are underway right now?
Well, first of all, Ali, I think looking at the situation there in Afghanistan, we've been saying from the beginning that isolation will never be an answer. And when we are talking about an engagement is required with whoever is governing Afghanistan, because abandoning Afghanistan will be a big mistake, and we are going to punish the Afghan people for something they didn't commit. Actually, our aim with the current engagement between Taliban and the US, with Taliban and different international actors, is finding a way forward, how to deal with the situation in Afghanistan, because we cannot leave it as it is, and we cannot just wait for steps to be taken by Taliban, and then we react to these steps. I believe that the international community have a responsibility to direct those steps and to be clear and to have a clear roadmap in dealing with the situation over there. And just, as a few examples, they have a lot of challenges. One of them is the economic situation over there. The financial system is totally closed. Public servants are not paid. Their assets the government assets have been frozen without also a clear path forward. And there are plenty of issues. When we are talking about the issues of the right of minorities, the right of women, education, all other issues, we cannot judge now with only by the actions that's being taken by Taliban without even allowing the government to be able to reactivate those schools. So, for example, if the economic situation is at this level and there is no any access to finance, how they are going to pay the teachers, how they are going to pay the doctors in the public hospitals. Other challenge is the issue of counterterrorism. Now we know that Afghanistan has been, given the situation that has been through since 40 years with the war with the Soviets, then the civil war, and then after the US and the Allies forces, we have seen that there is always an evolving group of extremists, group of terrorists. How we are going with such a situation if Taliban, yes, they committed that they will not represent, Afghanistan will not represent any threat to any other country, but how we are going to work together in order to prevent our countries from such a threat, the neighboring countries, the challenges of immigration, the humanitarian assistance, all these challenges cannot be addressed without engaging with the de facto power over there, which is Taliban. The third issue, we believe, is how to encourage them to have a real national reconciliation, a genuine process that includes all the Afghans together. So I believe that this cannot happen just by leaving Taliban alone and deal with the situation as they believe it's right, but it's our role as an international community to urge them to take the right steps and to incentivize those right steps and to see a way forward for it.
Let's talk about how this has evolved, because the Taliban of 20, 25 years ago did not recognize other governments, generally speaking. They didn't deal with any democracies. They had zero interest in being a cooperative government or a pluralistic organization. Now, in this very hotel, you will see Taliban representatives sitting here. Are they different? Are these ones different than the ones back there? And have they evolved as a group into someone whom diplomats like you and others in the world and the United States can deal with?
Well, I think there is no such a movement rigid. They evolve always, either to the extreme or to the moderation. And we have seen this throughout history. If you will see the factors that played in the last 20 years, there are a group of Taliban who have been fighting there in the battleground in Afghanistan, which I believe their evolution is different than Taliban who were negotiating here in Doha. And they have seen the world, they have interacted with governments, they have visited different countries. And talking to them, it seems that the mindset has changed, the attitude has changed. But actually, changes by just engaging and talking is not something. Is not an evidence for a real change. The real change would be the steps, genuine steps to be taken on the ground. And I think what we are waiting for are the real actions. But also, we cannot just depend on the actions that will be taken by Taliban without providing them with a guidance as an international community.
So how different is your position than the position of the United States Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, who is saying we need to see what you're doing on these fronts in order to determine what our cooperation with you will look like? Sounds like you're saying something similar, but you're adding this, we, meaning the international community, need to provide a roadmap or some way in which they can move forward.
Well, I believe we are sharing the same objective, the same goal, to see Afghanistan stable, to see it inclusive, to see the people enjoying their rights over there, and none of the gains that the Afghan people have achieved in the past years, in the past decades, will be reversed. And the only difference that maybe we have, which I don't see much difference, is on the tactic, how to achieve this goal. From the US perspective, they see that they want to see some progress in the front of the free passage, which we totally agree with them, and we are seeing that progressing step by step, and on the women issue. And there are also some small steps we believe they are not enough yet to be there. But from our perspective, we see that it's very important to provide guidance for them, to insist on rewarding by each step that each positive step that they are going to take, and not just to talk about the penalizing with the negative steps. This will create an incentive for progress and for the way forward, and will help if there are, as maybe some analysts say, there is a difference between the Taliban who are leading now the government. This will help the moderate power to also to provide an incentive to be more influential and more effective in their government.
They don't have a lot of friends in the world right now. Are you their friend?
Well, it's not about they have friends or enemies. I think the whole world now is engaging with them from, each country is engaging with them from a different lens. As Qatar has been a mediator in that process, we have been an impartial mediator, and what we want to see over there is a stable Afghanistan, inclusive, that the people can live peacefully with each other. It's different maybe than the lens of the neighboring countries who are facing some threats because of migration, maybe because of terrorism, and it's also different than the lens that they've been seen through the Europeans and the others, or China. It's totally different. We cannot classifying them by friends and adversaries and enemies or whatever it's called. I think that Qatar has maintained with its neutrality during the negotiation a good relationship with all the Afghan parties. And it's not exclusive for Taliban, but all the other Afghans, we've been engaging with them positively, and we still engaging with them. In fact, when I was visiting Kabul a few weeks ago, I have visited Taliban, and I have met also some of the leaders of the former government, like Abdullah Karzai and others. And we are maintaining a very good relationship, because we believe that the only way forward for all the Afghans to come together.
You were going somewhere there that I was looking for you to go to when I asked if you are the friends, because China has offered what looks very much like a hand of friendship to the Afghans, or at least a hand of support, or something that says that our engagement with you does not come with the conditions that American engagement comes with. And I almost wonder whether you in Qatar are in the best position to tell all the parties involved that there is a real danger that if the West doesn't engage with the Taliban, and it's very distasteful for the West to want to engage with the Taliban until they demonstrate meaningful change in terms of human rights. But if the West doesn't engage with Taliban, is there a meaningful risk that China steps into that void and provides them with the technology and the money that they need?
Well, I think that first of all, we shouldn't look at Afghanistan, and our advice to all our friends, including China, shouldn't look at Afghanistan as a competition, or that we are racing toward engaging with them. We should have a cooperative approach. We should unify our vision in dealing with Afghanistan. Part of the challenge that we are facing right now is there is no a clear platform where the international community can come together with the main players and active players on the Afghan issue on a single platform to agree on a unified roadmap and way forward. And that's what we are trying to do by engaging with all the other countries, China, Russia, neighboring countries, Europe, and the United States. We are aiming to reach to that stage, and I believe right now there are different groups who are meeting together to agree on a way forward, and the only way forward will be by getting all those involved parties in one single platform and to agree on a way forward. Because there are a lot of concerns regarding Taliban by Taliban themselves. For example, the sanctions, travel ban, all these issues are requiring Security Council resolutions, which needs Russia, China, and the United States, and France and Britain, all of them together to agree upon. So such a requirement by Taliban cannot be fulfilled only by China or by United States solely. It needs all of them to work together hand in hand. And I believe we can reach there. We are in our reach out to all those countries. We have been listening to them, and we didn't see a big difference right now. I think what we are in need is organizing and streamlining all these processes together.
There are many examples around the world, the Quartet in the Middle East, the P5+1 in Iran, the North Korean task force. Obviously, the goal here, or at least what looks obvious, is that Qatar is going to be central to this. The table is probably in this city near us where that is going to happen. What model are you looking toward to move toward agreement with the Taliban?
Well, there is no decision yet first on the venue or on Qatar to be a center of this. We are trying to play our role as previous mediator between the Taliban and the US. We continue playing that role also by our relation with the other Afghan parties and the other countries. Qatar maintain a friendly relationship with everyone. We believe that neighboring countries are essential and very important. P5 are important. The EU is important, as well as some regional actors who are also important in the situation there in Afghanistan as concerning them, including some of the large Muslim countries, which they are going to play a very important role in advocating for more moderation by Taliban. And I believe those Muslim countries will have the stronger argument with Taliban if there are any issues arise ahead of us. So I think such a format will be sufficient to provide a consensus within the international community for the way forward.
The Taliban had said actually on Saturday that it was going to rule out cooperation with the United States to contain extremist groups in Afghanistan, including ISIS-K. That was one likely spot where both the American public and the American government could say, without recognizing you, without legitimizing you as a government, we both have a separate problem here, and that is extremist groups. I mean, it's interesting even to use that language in respect to the Taliban, but it's a group that even they think of it as an extremist group. How do you manage that? That may be one of the first things to try and bring cooperation on.
Well, I think this is not the work of just a few days of the meetings here, but has been a work in the last couple of years when we reached the agreement between the US and Taliban, which was a very clear part of that agreement, not to allow any groups to represent any threat for any other country from Afghanistan, and to be committed to fight any extremist groups in Afghanistan. And as far as we are reaching right now, we have seen that ISIS-K is not only representing a threat for the Afghan people or for the allies forces, but also represented a threat for Taliban, and we have seen them engaging actively over there. And we encourage them to continue that engagement and that confrontation to eliminate such a group and to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan. And we don't see anything that can prevent Taliban from dealing with other countries and cooperate with them in fighting those groups, because we see it as a common interest for everyone, and we are encouraging that, and we hope that this cooperation will expand also beyond Taliban and the US, but also other players. The issue of recognition, Ali, I think people are very much focused on, which we always try to downgrade it because it's not a priority, and we recognize countries, we don't recognize governments. So as long as there is a country called Afghanistan and there are Afghan people, we need to deal with that situation. Despite the government which is in power, we need to find a way forward, not to abandoning this country. And I think everyone now is in line with that, and we are moving forward without talking about the recognition at this stage, but maybe on the way forward.
We non-diplomats get caught up on these words. you know, things like recognition and legitimization. Let's talk about your relationship with the United States. Every time you and I have spoken in the last few years, you've been at a different place with the United States, right? Qatar had started at a very good place with the United States, a host of a major forward operating base, cooperation on every level, militarily, diplomatically. And then you hit a bit of a hiccup when the Trump administration came in. Much of that has smoothed over. To whom do you, who should we be looking to be happy that that's smoothed over? Is that the end of the Trump administration? Is it something else? Is it your neighbors in the GCC? What has fundamentally happened here to get you back on track?
Well, I think looking at the nature of U.S.-Qatar relation, it has been there for decades now, and we've been enjoying a strong relationship with different administrations and across institutions. And even when the time, during the time of the previous administration, maybe we have some hiccups, but it was with some personalities over there because of some misunderstandings, and this has been cleared, and we have continued growing our relationship even during President Trump administration, even during the crisis. And what we have seen as a development right now, it's simply we stood with our allies at the end of the day when they are in need. Of course, we are going to step up. And our relation with the U.S. here as representative of my government, it's something out of question. It's a strong alliance. It's among our strongest partner, and our relation with them, it's a very solid relationship, a strategic relationship, which we believe it's important for the security and the stability of the region, and also it's mutually benefiting both countries, whether it's from security perspective or from economic perspective.
Do you pretend everybody's not here and we're not on camera? Did you feel betrayed a little bit by the United States?
Well, I cannot call it betrayal. Look, Ali, we need to be also realistic. Each country taking its decision based on their own interest, and I think that it's applied also to Qatar. Sometimes maybe our interests with the U.S. are not going to coincide. So are we going to take the decision based on the U.S. interest or based on Qatar's interest? Of course, we are going to take a decision based on Qatar interest. One of the issues, if it comes where our interests are common, then we are going to work together. And we believe until now we have seen a common interest with the U.S. in most of the issues, and we are seeing eye to eye on those issues, and we are working closely together and building upon this. Differences, disagreements on small issues won't be an obstacle for developing a solid foundation for the relationship, as long as the other country is understanding. Each country has its own foreign policy. We need to understand when sometimes U.S. taking decisions which are not aligned with our policy, and they need also to understand once we are taking decisions not aligned with their interests. So I think it's the nature of the sovereign nation in the 21st century. So you cannot.
But the last one was sort of based on misunderstandings, or maybe a U.S. administration that didn't really fully understand its relationship or its role with Qatar. Do you feel that that's been ironed out, at least under the Biden administration, that mistakes or whatever you want to call it, that led to what happened with your neighbors and American support of your neighbors is less likely to happen under the Biden administration?
Well, I think that the misunderstanding that happened at that time, back in 2017, it has its own reason. We hope that those reasons will not be again, but I think that what's safeguarding the relationship between Qatar and the U.S. is the solid relationship between the institutions, and this is what has safeguarded it even from the misunderstanding that took place back in 2017. And Qatar continued to pursue that route by building this strong institutional relationship.
How do you feel about your relationship with your neighbors now in the GCC?
Well, I think
particularly the neighbor that surrounds you?
it's in much better place right now. After Al-Ula declaration, of course, there is a leadership will that to repair the relationship between our countries. The crisis, the GCC crisis, which almost took 3 years and a half, wasn't an easy one. It's not also easy to restore everything in one day, and will need time. But what we have seen by our leadership is that we are determined to restore this relationship, to rebuild a strong foundation of common interest among all the countries, because we need to stabilize and to bring back the GCC as a stable bloc in our region. It has been a waste of 3 years and a half by fracturing the GCC in that way and not to be working effectively, and we missed a lot of opportunities. And I believe all the leaders of the GCC, they are seeing the same thing, and now we want to move forward. We are trying to find and to identify where are the areas where we have common interest and build upon them, and we are exchanging visits with other countries, rebuilding economic relations, which we believe are going to be the important ones for the future. But also we need to look at ways and means for preventive diplomacy in order to prevent our countries from being in such a crisis again. And I think all the leaders, including His Highness the Emir, they are focusing on getting back the GCC as a strong bloc, as strong economically, as strong regionally and politically. And we are, all of us, we are working toward that.
What still remains to be done? In other words, are there, compared to 4 years ago, what is not the same as it used to be then?
Well, look, as I told you, the crisis definitely has affected the relationship. It's not as it used to be 4 years ago. But it doesn't mean that in these 4 years we didn't learn a lot of lessons. We learned a lot of lessons that we need to identify more areas of common interest, more areas of connectivity between our countries to prevent us from being in such a situation again, and also developing frameworks of preventive diplomacy in order also to avoid getting any conflict to reach to a stage that we have reached to. Of course, as we all know that we cannot get the relation back in a place in one day. It will need time to rebuild. And all the leaders of the GCC, they know that, and they are willing to maintain this engagement until we reach a better level than even we have achieved 4 years ago.
You are physically between two major adversaries in the region, Saudi Arabia and Iran. And when this happened, Iran stood by you. And your neighbors don't like that. Now, Iran is in a complicated place. It has become a little more hardline. The United States has discussed getting back into the Iran deal. It doesn't look like we're getting a lot of momentum in that direction. Once again, you're physically and politically in the middle of a major regional issue. Tell me a little bit about how you're thinking about Iran and Saudi Arabia and America and the Iran deal.
Well, our view on the policy in Iran remained unchanged since very long time. Even before the crisis, we see that Iran is part of our region, and engagement is important for all of us as GCC countries. And His Highness the Emir has repeated several times calling for a GCC-Iran dialogue. There was an initiative by late Sheikh Sabah and former President Rouhani in order to have such an engagement. This engagement didn't see the light, unfortunately, during the previous administration in the United States. Right now we see some positive momentum between the Saudis and Iran, and we are encouraging that. Our aim is to reach a regional security understanding between the GCC and Iran. Iran is our neighbor. Iran is a player in our region, and we all recognize that. We cannot deny it. We need to engage with them. Our differences, our disagreements can be resolved around the table. It cannot be resolved by confrontation. We cannot change geography. And we believe that the only way forward is to building on cooperation and to build also an area of common interest to prevent our countries from any future risk and instability.
Can you play a role in adding momentum to the discussions between Iran, well, not really discussions, but to the effort to revive the nuclear deal?
Well, you know that the nuclear part or the JCPOA parties are only the 5+1 and Iran. Qatar or any other country in the region, in our interest to see this agreement back in place and to see that there is no risk of nuclear race in our region. Of course, we are going to provide any assistance or support that will be needed by the parties. We are talking and engaging with Iran, encouraging them to go back to the deal, encouraging the US. Even during Trump administration, we were encouraging them and trying to shuttle between them and the Iranian in order to contain the situation. And we have managed to contain several situations from being exploded. And I think this role Qatar will continue to play because it's in our national interest. It's not because of anything else. Iran is, as you just mentioned, they are our next door neighbors. We are sharing borders with them. We are sharing the same water. We are sharing the same gas field. So there are a lot of common things, and we need to see Iran flourishing and being an active, positive player in our region, and that's our aim to see them. Right now, we see that the momentum is still not there yet, but we have seen some positive statements by the Iranian new government that they are willing to re-engage in Vienna. We are encouraging them to do so, and also we are encouraging the US to move forward with that, and also encouraging our region to have a separate engagement with Iran, because JCPOA is one part. Our relation with Iran is a full package, and I think that the whole GCC needs to engage directly with Iran away from any interference, and we start to redraw the architect of our region by the GCC initiative and taking the lead in that.
Since you and I talked, there's been a lot of activity between Israel, Palestine, and Gaza and Hamas. You are key players in that region as well. Also, since we've talked, the Abraham Accords have come into play. Now, Qatar's history with Israel goes back a long time. You actually enjoyed something akin to diplomatic relationships with Israel a long time ago. Where are you now? You were not included in the Abraham Accords. Do you think they were a good idea, and would you like to be involved, or do you think it's destructive to what's going on in the region?
Well, look, each country has its own perspective, and we respect each country's sovereignty, and they are building their decisions based on their own assessment. So the steps of Abraham Accord according to Qatar foreign policy is not going along together. Right now, we didn't see the right behavior or the right attitude by the Israelis for a peaceful resolution with the Palestinians themselves, because it was the core of the issue between the Arab countries and Israel, the occupation of the Palestinian territories.
But the Abraham Accords skipped that whole thing.
Well, as I told you, I'm entitled to talk about our foreign policy. This is our foreign policy.
Right.
We see that the core of the issue is the occupation. So as long as there is no prospect on that occupation, ending that occupation and having a fair and just solution, I don't see Qatar taking such a step of normalization. Israel is there. We are dealing with them. We continued our relation with them to serve the Palestinian people, to accommodate for the needs for the people, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, and trying to facilitate when there is any escalation and tension. We are trying to work together with our regional partners in order to get, to provide some assistance to get to a stage where it's calmer than it used to be. But as long as the core issue between the Palestinians and the Israelis are not resolved, and we don't see any prospect for a peace process, we don't think that this agreement will help. I mean, between us and Israel will help in resolving that issue. Look, Qatar is for peace. Qatar has been advocating for that for a long time. When we have seen positive prospects back in the 90s, we were the first ones to take such a step. But when we have seen
Yes.
the behavior afterward,
So you have a history of being able to enjoy diplomatic relationships with Israel under the correct circumstances.
yes.
However, do you see anything in the change of government in Israel and the departure of Benjamin Netanyahu that makes that prospect of an agreement or a settlement or something look more likely?
Well, we hope, but until now, we didn't see any real step. I mean, we are just talking about alleviating the economic situation there with the Palestinians, which is part of the problem, but not the core of the problem. The core of the problem is political. As long as the peace process is not addressed, you cannot just count on economic normalization or economic assistance and just forget about the occupation itself. So we believe that the issue is political, economic, social, it's all dimension, but the core of it is political. It is an occupation that needs to end.
What do you think about the way in which this last flare-up between them was conducted in the media? It does seem that whether it was the influence of social media or something else, there was more reporting from Gaza. There was more reporting from the Palestinian perspective. Do you think that the media has had an impact on how the world sees this?
Well, I think it's both. It's the act itself, and especially when it started with the eviction of the people in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, the provocation in Al-Aqsa that took place with the social media or the media overall has provided the platform for this, and they have seen what has been made for the Palestinian people over there. And then also, of course, on the war in Gaza, we have seen that the media itself been targeted in that, and they've been shot by rockets by the Israelis, the building of all the media outlets, and it started to show what's happening on the ground, which the people, the public, previously they didn't see.
And do you think that fundamentally has, so let's go back to the conversation about the GCC and the troubles that you've had here over the last few years. Of the demands that Saudi Arabia made at the beginning of the embargo, it's a list of many of them, media was high up on the list. Your media here in Qatar, Al Jazeera, is a thorn in the side of your neighbors, or particularly Saudi Arabia, your neighbor. What's happened with that? How did you get past that, and how did they get past that?
Well, I think, given the time of the crisis and what it took and what it costed us as GCC countries, we are not talking about demands or, anything that, any country that can demand things from another country without its will. And we have seen that also there is no, with what happened in the GCC, there is no winner out of this crisis. We believe, and we strongly believe, all of the GCC leaders believes the same, that all of us, we have lost in this, and we lost a lot of time during that crisis, and we only became a winner when we came back together. And after Al-Ula declaration, I think everything is behind us, and we are forward-looking, our leaders are forward-looking, and we want to build a stronger GCC to prevent it from anything similar in the future. And the media, at the end of the day, they are just one face of the issue. And in Qatar, we have been very determined that we provide all the Arabs audience with a fair media that without any interference, and this is what has Al Jazeera demonstrated now for more than 20 years. And I think this is going to continue, and we are going to remain impartial in that.
Your Excellency, I appreciate your time. It's always good to see you. I hope we continue to make this a regular occurrence.
Thank you very much, Ali, for
Thanks.
listening.
Please be seated as His Excellency leaves, and we'll get started with our next session right now. Okay. We thank His Excellency and Ali for those elucidating insights. And we are ready to start our next riveting fireside chat. It will be featuring Karim Khan, prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, and Bobby Ghosh, editor at Bloomberg. This session will focus on accountability for perpetrators of ISIS crimes, which remain low in many countries, even as evidence of ISIS's atrocities continues to mount. The prosecution of terrorists at the international level remains a complex challenge, and this session will reflect on some important progress made and challenges remaining